Good afternoon and welcome to Built It With Nobody Came, Working Over Engineering. My name is John Peck. I'm a senior engineer at Four Kitchens. I've been working there for about 2 years. Four Kitchens is an agency that builds digital presences. It's based out of Austin, Texas. At this point, the company is probably 60 to 70% distributed. I live in Northern California, out in the Bay Area. I've worked on a number of projects for Four Kitchens, including Time Incorporated, had an Entertainment Weekly architected that site, along with People Magazine doing their migrations. And then with Meredith Agrimedia, right now I'm working on Web Magazine and Successful Farming. So a lot of large sites. Some of these stories are, come from those experiences, and also just from, basically a couple decades of development. So, all right, starting off, what is this thing called over-engineering? Wikipedia defines it as designing a product that is going to make it more robust and more complicated than necessary for any particular application, and that sometimes just to ensure safety, sometimes for trying to get make sure the functionality is in there, or because of design errors. This can be summed up as just trying to make something that isn't actually used. Cannon to kill a fly is a perfect example of this. It technically will kill the fly. It'll absolutely obliterate it. There will not be a trace of the fly left. You've succeeded. You've built something that's completely insane, and all that power isn't necessary. Nobody actually needed a cannon. They just wanted to kill that one fly. So, an example of this, right off the bat, we're going to get into the gory details, and this is real. CreativeWorks. So, old publication system had a librarian. As a person whose full-time job was to manage that taxonomy. This is a taxonomy of what we refer to as CreativeWorks. So things like movies, books, and music had actors and actresses and like various different roles. And it was a tightly managed taxonomy. Everything was kind of split out in very logical ways. And then the librarian left. And so the editors who continued to use the system didn't actually care that much about it, so they just started just free tagging, similar to WordPress. Or Drupal also has just built-in tags. We'll just tag it as Ryan Reynolds. Okay, great. And then you don't know if Ryan Reynolds is a person or a movie. It doesn't matter. It's just tagged Ryan Reynolds. So we were brought in to create a new site. The product owner wanted to bring order to the new site. It's like we have this kind of hodgepodge of flat tags and this tightly managed taxonomy. Let's put everything together. Let's bring it back to parity. Let's bring order from chaos. So we did that. It's like spent a lot of time, created this complicated migration, doing this mapping of like, okay, gave them a spreadsheet, just like fill it out, like check here if you want this to be a movie, check here if you need this to be renamed. We did ton of work to be able to get everything into a tightly managed taxonomy once again. And we were successful. But prior to launch, the product owner left. And the replacement didn't care. Didn't share the vision, didn't have the same passion. It was like, yeah, I just want to ship the site, I don't really care. And editors weren't involved in the process. They were just like, oh, we have this new tool that we're supposed to use. Great, whatever. Just point me and tell me the absolute bare minimum that I need to do to be able to deliver my message. And that's it. So the site launched, and today it's using flat tags, if anything. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money building something that isn't used. Now, why did that happen, and how can we prevent that? There's a number of things that can cause over-engineering. Some of it is human nature. It's like we, as people, want to do good things for good people. It's like we want to try to help. And so it's like, hey, I have this problem. You're just like, yes, I have the ability to help you solve it. And it's really easy to just say, yes, I'm going to help you, without actually questioning. It's like, is this the right thing that I should be doing? Is there other ways that I can help you? Or if you just say, it's like, I need this particular feature, and you're like, yes, absolutely, I can build that. Some of it is pride. I don't want to say no. It's like, oh, can you do this? Oh yeah, of course I can do that. It's like, it's like, oh, this might take me a really, really long time. You're not going to admit that. You're just going to say, yeah, I'm going to do this. Or it's like, I can do this. Of course, why wouldn't you say that you couldn't? Ignorance, because you don't necessarily know that there's another way. Especially then and I'll get into prescriptive approaches, but basically if someone says, I want you to do this, and you're like, absolutely, I will do that, without knowing, it's like, well, is this the only way to do it? Or taking a really inefficient approach because you don't have the experience or the knowledge to tell you that there is another way. And finally, don't care. It's like, this is somebody else's problem. Again, with a prescriptive approach, or if you have someone who's acting kind of like a dictator and saying, it's like, this is the way that you need to do it, use these particular tools, and you're like, yes, sir, I'm a dumb hammer, boom, I'm going to build it exactly that way, I don't really care what the consequences are. Large organizations can do it, small organizations can do it. We've all probably experienced it in one way or another. So taking responsibility, or the lack thereof, is part of what causes over-engineering. Another example, let's reinvent panels. Panels, if you're not familiar with it, at a very high level, is a system that allows you to control layout of a page, and you can give it particular context, like say if I have a story, but if it's a story of this particular type, I'm going to have the layout look like this. It gives you a nice user interface, so you can move things around, you can store the end result in code. So in a way, it's doing things that, yes, as a developer, you could do completely by hand, but it makes it easier and faster because we as humans like visual things that we can move around and click and drag. So, technical stakeholder at the client said, panels, I've heard about that, that makes a site slow. Panels is a tool. You can do really horrible, terrible things with it. You can do really good things with it. It's a means to an end. It's like blaming a car for killing people because they were running across the street. It's not necessarily this car fault, it's how you use it. So they said, nope, no panels. Can't use panels on the site. But we actually need the flexibility of panels. We want to be able to have this home page that we can rearrange the elements in it, and at our whim. It's like, okay. So we reinvented the wheel. We did what they asked. We pushed back, but not enough. We ended up adding like dozens, if not hundreds of hours to the project, and created this kind of fragile and scary code base of like this feature that did work, technically work, but at the end of the day, all we actually needed to do was use panels. As an over-engineered solution, in part because of ignorance. We didn't make a compelling enough point to the client. The client didn't want to listen, so there was a little bit of arrogance going on. It wasn't great communication, and all of these things came together, and also like just a certain amount of, all these things came together, and we reinvented panels. Over-engineering can start in a number of different places. It can start in the design. You have wireframes and mock-ups. Something is just a little tiny little feature. It's like, hey, this is a social media aggregator. It's like, oh, that sounds great. Except, wait a second. So, how does this thing actually work? Do you want to set up some kind of API integration with Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and all these things to bring it all together and then like display these cards in a particular format? Hold on. What is actually this one little thing in a wireframe suddenly turns into a massive amount of work. Meetings, and because humans can communicate in ways that are not always clear, and you can pick up just an innocuous comment, write it down. It's like, yeah, no, it'd be nice to have that, and so it's like, oh yes, I want to make you happy. Write it down, and then later it's like, okay, so what are the requirements of this project? Oh yeah, well they said they wanted this, okay, and then you spend a lot of time building something that, and then at the end of the day they're like, wait, why do we have this thing? Or, I was like, well, you said it was a requirement. I was like, no, I said it was nice to have. So it's a miscommunicated requirement, and you didn't really understand that they didn't actually care about it. They were just like, yeah, well, sure, it sounded fine. Architecture, so when you're designing the site, having prescriptive requirements, not necessarily trusting the implementers in what they're doing. So instead of telling them what a goal of the feature is, you're going to tell them exactly, build it like this, use this exact tool, have this configuration, I want you to do it exactly this way. Instead of delegating the responsibility to someone who has possibly more experience than you, it's like you just give them rote instructions, and so you end up you end up with the Tom Hammer kind of approach, where it's like, well, he told me to build it that way, so I'm going to build it that way, for better or worse. And then in implementation itself, the people who are actually building the site can absolutely go off in their own direction. Either out of ignorance, like they don't know any better. You have people, especially like with inexperience, it's like we're fresh out of school or just really excited. I heard about this new technology, this new technique. I'm going to use this. Not necessarily thinking through. It's like, is this actually a good fit for the project? Do we actually need to do this? Is this really complicated? Are we reinventing the wheel? Or possibly it's like, hey, this is actually built into the programming language of the framework that you're using, and you just don't know it exists, so you re-implement a feature. Like, maybe even to something as simple as a for each loop. Like, I've seen developers actually write their own version of for each because they didn't know that it existed. So, not all the stories I'm going to tell are, gory. Some of them are actually success stories, like how did we avoid it? So, an event reservation system. So, excuse me, there was a site that had a tight budget, like every project usually, but had an events calendar. This in itself is actually pretty innocuous. Event just has a date, it has a title, show it in an aesthetically pleasing way. This is, not unusual. Wireframe and an RSVP button. What's this? This can be, implies a lot of additional functionality. In the context, this is a Drupal 8 site. There isn't a full calendaring RSVP system that is mature in Drupal 8 yet. So, okay, we can't build that within the scope of Drupal, or within the scope of this particular site. Wait, hold on. Do we actually need to build this? Well, so that wasn't available. So we actually asked the client, had that conversation. Okay, so you have this in here. What is the functionality that you're expecting out of this? Are you expecting, the RSVPs to be handled in Drupal or somewhere else? And actually, it turned out, no, we have Eventbrite. We're going to be syncing events from an Eventbrite into Drupal, so we can just link directly to the form. Just an easy path to it. Oh, that's really simple. But you can see like how that kind of snowball effect can occur. It's like, you have a form, this is built into Drupal, you want to have this RSVP, okay, now we've got to build an RSVP system into Drupal? No, not necessarily. And internet, sweet. So, avoiding issues. So analyze request. When you hear about it, it's like, okay, I need you to build X. Ask a few questions. And you can do this to yourself, and you can actually have the conversation with whoever's making a request. What's the goal of the feature? It's like, how does it add value? It's like, instead of just saying, yes, I'm going to do this, it's like, why are we doing this? Actually look at it kind of holistically. Who actually needs the feature? Is this just one person, like the product owner, who just decided, without actually consulting the editors, like, hey, we need to build this really complicated thing, and you're going to use it because that's what you want, right? Well, okay, did you actually ask the editors? No, no one actually bothered to ask the editors. So who actually is asking for it? Why is this feature needed? It's like, is this just because you heard about it at a conference and it sounded cool? Or is this something that is actually delivering some kind of function that your application or your organization needs? Is this the only way to do this? For example, like the event system with the RSVP, it's like, yeah, you can build something into Drupal that can do it, but you can also integrate with something like Eventbrite or another third-party vendor whose business is devoted to doing event management. And then what data backs that up? Improving it with numbers. It's like, okay, so hopefully you have knowledge of who your audience is, and it's like, are people actually asking for it, or what type of data backs that up? For example, the minimum version of Internet Explorer. As people who work on the web, you're familiar with the kind of the rocky past that Internet Explorer's had. Recently, it's been not as bad, but we used to have to do like horrible over-engineering to just be able to support that. So we started a project, and the front-end engineer assumed that we needed to support very old versions of Internet Explorer, going back to Internet Explorer. I think it was 7 or 8. It's like, okay, that's going to add a lot of complexity to the project. Both the code base and the layout that needs to remain have to do additional testing, we got to deal with browser stack, all these other things. Hold on, we actually need to support that. So we took a look at Google Analytics, which actually records, what the actual real visitors are using, what browsers they're using. It turns out that only 3% of the audience was actually using anything below Internet Explorer 10. Oh, thank goodness. Didn't have to deal with HTML5 shift, didn't have to put in all these additional style sheet rules and exceptions. Made the site build a lot easier, saved time and money. Why? Because we actually took a couple seconds and actually looked at the data that was available to determine, do we actually need to build this thing? If we built it, it would work, but it wouldn't be necessary. So all of this comes into building what's known as a minimal viable product. And this doesn't mean doing bare minimum. It means it's a product that has just enough features to gather validated learning around a product and its continuing development. So the idea is that you're trying to have a conversation about the product. If you say, it's like, I would like you to build this and this and this, it's like, okay, let's start with something concrete that we can actually look at. This is the simplest potential version. This doesn't mean we're going to be launching with this, but this is something that we can actually get your hands on, allow you to actually interact with it. It can be a wireframe, it can be a prototype, or it can be an actual implementation in a fully built site. And so once you have that, you can actually have a conversation and start iterating over that. By having this minimum viable product, allows you to estimate, to find the cost of the feature, and getting to that point, it's like, okay, at a bare minimum, it's like, okay, you want form integration, it's going to take, 10 hours to do that. It's like you want to deal with this social media aggregator that you just want to build. Okay, that's going to take 60 hours to build. Which would you prefer? And that it allows you to help prioritize based on just kind of your own experience and that estimation. So, and you say, well, actually, I don't really care about the social media integration. It just seems kind of easy. If it's going to be too much work, we can deal with maybe just Twitter cards. It's like, okay, that's kind of a minimum feature. You're still delivering the functionality, but you don't actually have to build more than was actually necessary. And then once you have that bare minimum, it's like, okay, now we've got the Twitter cards. We also want to add Facebook into the mix. It's like once you have that absolute bare minimum, then you can start iterating. Then you can start adding to the process. But until you have something that is a minimum, you can't really have the conversation. You don't know what it's going to look like. And they could actually look at, it's like, okay, well, here's the Twitter cards. We don't like that. We think it's distracting on the page. Get rid of it entirely. Great. You just saved the time by building something that was smaller rather than delivering this entire feature that aggregates all this data across multiple social networks into one thing that you don't actually use. Yes?
I have a question related to that.
Sure.
When you're iterating, are you supposed to take into account take architectural decisions based on what might come in the future? Or if, for example, I only want Twitter now, but then I will want several others, and I will need something completely different to manage the whole social networks, the whole group of social networks. Should the MVP be focused and solve the problem with Twitter cards, or should I in advance take some consideration of an architectural decisions that in the future I will use for the other providers?
Well, some of it is contextual. So, with the example of a social media aggregator, it's like, okay, build a system that can take in, excuse me, one feed and render it. It's like, and with an assumption that anything that we add onto it will have a multiplier effect. We have the experience of putting the one in. We can put additional ones, additional networks in there. Iteration in that particular instance, does actually include, the experience that you've had implementing that one, and that can help drive. It's like, hey, we want to add 3 more. It's like, okay, it's probably going to take, say, 2 hours, for each one. Does that sound reasonable to you? Yeah, all right, then we can do it. Or if you're concerned about the logistics of doing that kind of aggregation, say pick two, and then make a system that can handle the two of them and do it gracefully, and then add more to it. So an MVP is honestly there is no right answer to it. It's situational based on the needs of the project. But if you frame it in what can I get in front of the client that they can use and have a coherent opinion on? It's like what is the simplest thing that I can build that they can use? So here's another gory tale, a cautionary tale: editorial control over list items. So editors wanted an optional, arbitrary placement of items in a list of content. So it's like, all right, we've got a list of the latest news, but in item, and most of the time that's going to be empowered by the taxonomy. Sounds easy, everything in the news category, great. Except every once in a while, I'm going to take over, say, slot number 3, and I'm going to put in this one article. It doesn't matter how it's tagged. It's just going to appear there. Okay. All right, what's driving that? No, editors want that. Okay, fine. So we built it, and it worked. It's like it was kind of complicated. Use some of Drupal native components, add combination of views and some custom logic. But at the end of the day, we didn't actually need to build that. If we had just given them here's a sticky flag, and you put something on top of the list, and it's going to sort by sticky, and then date descending things in this category, probably would have been perfectly fine. Placement number 2 didn't actually matter as much as being able to pin something at the top of the list. If we had gone through the exercise of actually providing them with this, a minimum version of just like, here's a sticky flag, does that work for you? That would have saved that extra over-engineered piece of functionality that honestly nobody. Well, people thought they wanted it, but they didn't actually use it once it was built. Conversely, there's under-engineering. You can actually not build enough. You have to know that what's required. So iteration communicates by making something tangible, something that you can actually work with and touch and use. If it can't be used, you can't particularly iterate over it. You need to get it to just something that you can have a conversation. And so if you don't have something to iterate on, it's like you have to build it and get it to that point. So if you have a site, for example, you've been working on it for several months, and most of the functionality is complete, all the content's migrated, the content types have been set up, categories are being set up, and parts of the site are being themed. It's like, okay, here, take a look at this. This outside vendor wanted to do some SEO optimization or Google publishing tags or some other kind of work on it. And it's like, okay, well, we want to take a look at the site. We presented it to them in the state that it was in. It's like, yeah, this is almost completely functionally complete. We're just adding some polish. They took a look at it. It's like, the site's not built yet. They're like, that's not accurate. Or is it? Well, the problem was that the navigation hadn't been completely finished. So, it was actually rendering the menu, but the menu was actually didn't contain all the links that it needed to, had a lot of placeholders. So just spent a couple hours, went through the menu system, linked to things that basically linked to all real world content, removed the placeholders, and for all the content that was actually there, and presented them back to her. It's like, wow, you did so much work in a very tiny amount of time. It's like, no, what we presented to you wasn't minimally viable. This wasn't something that you could actually use. That was our fault. We focused too much on the individual pieces of functionality without actually looking at it as what is the minimum that we can build to actually have a coherent conversation with another group about this. So another kind of over-engineering is something or pitfalls that engineers, myself included, can do, which is like asking yourself, do I really need to do that? So if you spend hours making changes to a system that has no tangible effect on the system, did you really need to do that? And it can be really tempting, especially if you know, somebody else had been in the code base and left things kind of sloppy, you want to clean it up, you want to make some changes. If you're just making changes for change's sake and it's not actually delivering any value, why are you doing it in the first place? Artificial challenges whose solutions don't impact the the product, such as output from automated tools, for example, can tell you about based on this one algorithm, it's like here are all the coding sins that you put in. Are you hearing Drupal coding standards? I'm the first to beat that drum loudly. But if you're coming onto a project that didn't necessarily have those, trying to apply those coding standards to the entire code base and rectifying all the previous sins that other people have done, it's not an effective use of your time. In fact, it's more likely to damage the site, if you do something wrong. So the next couple of examples are going to be kind of slippery slopes like that. For example, version updates. So and just to make it very clear, always applies security updates and upgrades. If something comes along, you say module version 1.5, 1.6 fixes bugs, update. No questions asked. Always apply relevant bug fixes. Again, keep it up to date. Make sure that if it's like, hey, this particular site feature is broken because of this module, and now there's a fix for it, apply it. Incrementally update, when an update is it's convenient and testable. So it's like, all right, views has gone from 1.5 to 1.6. All right, it doesn't, it takes care of a couple things behind the scenes, but doesn't actually have any practical impact on what I'm doing. Let's update it when we get a chance. Maybe make sure that we've got BCAT tests in place or something, to make sure that the expected site functionality is there. All right, so now we've got this. Okay, so it's an incremental update. What if it's an upgrade? It's like, okay, we're moving from features 1.6, something that's stable, to features 2. And it's like, okay, so that is a major upgrade. Do I actually need to do that? Or is the site functioning properly? Are there any new features in this that I actually need? Or am I just doing it for the sake of doing it? So there's and the reason why I talk about this, especially in the context of maintaining a server, maybe you have a web server that's running Apache 2.2, but it's the latest security update of 2.2. It's older, it's not the latest and the greatest, but it works. Moving from 2.2 to 2.4 can be a painful process, especially if you have a production site and if you don't have the resources to necessarily change everything over. That, say, a year down the road, you're going to be throwing it all away, and when you relaunch with a new site, don't force someone to go through and incrementally update everything arbitrarily. Do it if you have a reason, if there's a compelling reason. If there's a security update, if there's a relevant bug fix, if it's not breaking the functionality that you have, or if you have a compelling reason. Don't just do it because we're programmed to be gamified, like, yes, 2 is bigger than 1, so we must go to 2. I mentioned tools that that enforce coding standards. ESLint is fantastic at detecting JavaScript problems. So the particular project that this comes from was a site optimization project, where it's like we used ESLint and produced a fantastic list of all the problems including in the site. So there were syntax errors, there was things that would cause warnings and errors that it detected, but also stylistic problems. So it's like, okay, this is a bunch of noise, but we as human beings don't like being told that things are wrong. We want to fix it. We've been brought on this project to make the site better. This is one of the things that we can do better. What should have gotten a whole bunch more acceptance testing because it touched many different areas of the site. Yes, it's clean. Yes, it's perfect. Yes, you can look at it and say, yes, that was nicely commented. Did you actually need to go through and do that, or is the site working well before? Yeah, the code was a bit messy, but it was working. So just fix what needed. Fix what you need to. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't go through and rebuild the entire site. Micro optimizations are also another slippery slope. This is the art of going through and doing a comparison of how different PHP native functions. There is an actual difference between how fast for or for each can run, how fast echo and prints work. Using dot first concatenation versus comma. These all have impacts. Notice I didn't say they had practical impacts. For most sites, unless you're something like Facebook, it's not going to make a web slap a difference. In fact, it's actually going to make the site harder to maintain. There's no actual practical difference. You only see differences when you're iterating millions of times per second. It makes it harder to maintain. It makes it, the code itself more confusing. It's better to focus on the big picture. It's if the site is slow, it's not because of a for versus for each. You probably have some gnarly queries in there. You're probably doing work that you don't have to do. You're probably not caching effectively. There's all sorts of different things that you should focus on, like looking at the application holistically and determining what are the slow components. Doing these micro optimizations are not actually going to make your site faster. If anything, it's just going to waste time. So, anybody have over engineering stories that they'd like to share? I bared my heart and soul. Yes.
Actually, it's a break that it's still running, but it's in the final phase now.
Mm-hmm.
So it is for a city, a government, type of project, and they have 3 core content types that they use. But the thing is that each one of those, actually 2 of them have 40 fields each. And they wanted 40 fields. Mm-hmm. And throughout the process, they changed type, they changed decision, they dropped things, then they requested them back, it was crazy. But in the end, there are 40 fields on those 2 content types. The other one is just a wrapper around it. And the point is, we try to push back as much as possible because, we were almost run out of budget, mm-hmm. And the contract strike, the field definition wasn't ready, wasn't finished. Mm-hmm. They were always asking for more changes, and there were many other features left to be built. Mm-hmm. And so, I would like to know, how to handle those kind of situations because the client, their arguments say, we're going to fill out this form once a year because it is too costly to, the people that will work on them, it is too expensive to bring them all together in one place and just doing at random. Mm-hmm. So we will do it once a year and that needs to be ready now. Most of those fields from the 40 they are going to use only 3. When the site launches, they will use 3 or 4. And the other ones are just because it is too costly to bring those people again to fill out that information. Mm-hmm. So, is that reasonable or no? Has that happened to you, or how can you handle that situation?
Yeah, well, there's based on what you're telling me, that doesn't sound reasonable. But I can absolutely see from kind of both perspectives, how that kind of situation can occur. Ways that you can kind of head that off the press, or at least make it more difficult for that to happen, is some of it is focusing on what is minimally viable and saying, it's you want us to keep making little tweaks to this field. What are the things that you actually need to launch with, and we need to build these other things. Here's the cost of what it will take to add these other fields to this form, and actually putting a number to it and saying, okay, we got to get these other things done. Here's the backlog. How important is it? And if the client is always saying it's everything is required, of course it is. But some things are more important than others. Use that to kind of drive the backlog management. Drive the conversation and say, okay, there are some things that you absolutely must have, and there are things that are nice to have. And then that way you can not necessarily procrastinate, but put it later in the project and say okay, we need to get these pieces together to be able to get a launch date and be able to hit it on budget. We can't do this extra stuff on top of that. Some of it is communication, some of it is trust. You need to build trust with the client, to the point that you can communicate that it's like, hey, based on our experience, what you're asking for isn't necessarily reasonable, and so you need to get them to both trust you and also understand from their perspective. They're probably not making the request completely out of the bag. It could be, I don't know the players, but it's like understand that they have a reason that they're asking for it. Why do you need it? Ask those questions, and then try to find a compromise, something that works, both technically and politically in this particular situation. Something that, some of it is scheduling, some of it is having the conversation. So, yeah, I've absolutely been in those situations, and it can be difficult. These techniques do help. It won't prevent it completely, but having, some of it is having that dialogue, making sure that you've informed them, giving them the information that they need to be able to make an effective decision about how important it is to have all this stuff crammed in one place, or just making, say, hey, each time you do this, it's going to take us longer to make changes to it. Anyone else? All right, well, to wrap this up, avoiding engineering, over-engineering is not an excuse to say no. There is actually another presentation that is just no, and there is a time and place for that, but I think that the conversation needs to be more nuanced than that. It's like instead of just saying no, say yes, and give them the context, and yes, and this is going to cost 40 hours worth of time to be able to put this together. We're not going to be able to get to this other thing that you said is really important. Are you okay with this? You're not? Okay. Well, let's find a way to, solve both those needs. So it's a conversation, it's evolving, any project is evolving. Get it to a point that you can iterate over it. Get it to a point that you can actually have a coherent conversation about the thing that you're building. And that will make everybody's lives easier. The client will be happier because there's something tangible that they can use. You'll be happier because you're not building things that they're not using. Thank you very much for your time.